To everyone who is joining us on today's webinar. I'd like to welcome all of you to our webinar for today, which is Positive Relationships, A Path to Peaceful Families. And our guest today is Chaplain Tarif Shraim, and I will be participating in the webinar with him. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about Peaceful Families Project, and then what we're going to cover today in the webinar. And I'll be introducing our guest speaker in a couple of minutes. So my name is Salma Abu Jaderi, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm also a founding board member of Peaceful Families Project, as well as a director of training. And for those of you who may be new to our programming, Peaceful Families Project is a national organization that is dedicated towards ending domestic violence in Muslim families. And the way that we accomplish our goal is to focus on education and training, providing community awareness about domestic violence, as well as focusing on healthy relationships, which is what our webinar today will be addressing, how we can enhance and repair our relationships, and we're all in many relationships. As part of our programming, we also do professional development for imams and chaplains, teaching them how to respond more effectively to domestic violence. And we provide cultural sensitivity trainings to providers who are serving Muslims, whether for domestic violence or mental health needs. And we also develop lots of materials and resources, and we've conducted some research. So I invite you all to take a look at our website so you can familiarize yourself and with what we are doing. We have some programming coming up that's exciting, so please take a look on our website. Today's program is free, and we do try to offer some free programming, but of course it does still cost money. So if you'd like to support our free programming, I invite you to go to our website, peacefulfamilies.org, and click on the donate button. I'm very excited today to have Chaplain Tarif with us. I've actually known Chaplain Tarif for many years, since my son was a student at University of Maryland in College Park, and so I got to witness firsthand the wonderful contribution that he's made to many, many, many people's lives. And so I'm really grateful to have him today on our program. To introduce him a little bit more formally, Chaplain Tarif has been working with Muslim students and community members for over 20 years in Maryland. He's co-founder of the Center for Muslim Life in Maryland, and in that capacity, he seeks to foster spiritual and emotional development of Muslim college students. He also serves as the Imam of the Islamic Community Center of Potomac, and is one of the Imams of the Diyanat Center of America, also in Maryland. He is particularly interested in the intersection of spirituality and positive psychology, which is something that I'm also very interested in, the intersection of spirituality and mental health, and how we can really utilize our faith as a resource and our teachings as a resource in helping us to have the best relationships we can have, and to be the best people that we can have. So today we're going to have the webinar in a conversational style, and Chaplain Tarif and I will just be talking about our experiences, primarily his experiences and what he's learned over the years. We hope to give you a good understanding of some of the core needs that we all have in our relationships, and some things that every single one of us can do to improve and enhance the relationships that we're in. So I'm very excited to begin this conversation. Chaplain Tarif, would you just start us off by telling us, as you reflect on your many years of experience working with community members and college students in Maryland, what are some of the things that really stand out to you that really make you keen on helping people enhance their relationships?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah. Our first and foremost words of gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal, who brought us to this moment. And subhanAllah, I just want to say a word of also special thanks to you, Sister Salma, for all the work that you do. MashaAllah, I've been observing from close and also from afar. I highly admire the work of your organization and your meaningful and deliberate effort to really help our communities. And it has an impact. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Thank you.
Also, Sister Sumaya, for arranging the setup for this, working behind the scenes. I know oftentimes people do not perhaps see nothing, they see nothing but the face of an organization, may not appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. So barakallah fiqh, may Allah reward you. And also for inviting me to be a part of this effort and contribute in whatever ways I can. In brief, some 20 years of experience working primarily on college campuses. It's a blessing to be able to encounter the stories of young people. And I've also been blessed to work with the community. So it gave me this kind of unique opportunity to connect the dots, so to speak. So in a nutshell, and this could be the subject of a lengthy conversation, but in a nutshell, countless stories that I've seen of struggle that young people have, a range of spiritual, mental, and emotional health issues, widespread experience of trauma, high levels of stress, of feeling low self-worth. Many students that I sit with, also spouses, report feeling unloved, feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed out. Some have fallen the edge. And I'm also saddened to report that these types of issues, and we're scratching here only the surface, oftentimes have to do with family struggles, as people tell me, while I'm providing spiritual counseling to them. But sadly also, what many may not realize is that it's these types of issues and struggles that emanate from a unhealthy family climate or broken relationships with parents or with siblings, etc., also impact people's faith. So we've seen many young people actually fall off the edge and leave Islam and have very poor relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal because they end up judging their own faith based on the experiences that they gain at home. So they often link those, let's say, mistreatments that they receive from family or the abuse. They link it back to religion and faith and literally accuse the religion itself of being the culprit or the reason for all of this. So this is a really tragic thing that we work on as well, to rehabilitate and help young people regain their confidence even in their faith and with Allah Azza wa Jal. So I'll leave it at that for now because there's a lot to say about it, but also love to hear your perspectives as well, Sister Sandra.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've seen the same thing, and I find, one of the saddest things is when people interpret these negative experiences and relationships as a function of, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love them, or perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing them, or perhaps they're not a good enough Muslim, and that's why they're having these struggles, right? But we know that every person is going to be tested, and the fact that you're tested is not a reflection on it doesn't mean that you have a low iman or low faith. So, I'd love to hear how you kind of motivate people so that they're not stuck in that space, and that they could, feel more empowered to reconnect, with their faith as they also, address their relationship issues. What's the angle that you take with people? How do you advise people?
Well, subhanAllah, this is a really good question, Sister Selma. There's a lot to this, as you also have gained from your experience working with community members. So there's many dimensions to this. There's the spiritual dimension, there's the emotional dimension, there's a social dimension. It really does come down to education, but also I would say most important in addressing, especially young people, is that need to make them see themselves as being appreciated and loved by Allah Azza wa Jal, as you pointed out, that their uniqueness, their individuality matters, that they're not an accident that just happened on this earth, that their core needs are also valid and real. Because what ends up happening with many of these individuals and the consequential issues that they end up experiencing mentally and emotionally occur because of not feeling appreciated, loved, cared for, or even feeling safe. So it's a matter of helping them feel that they matter, that they're loved, that they deserve that love, and that their needs are actually valid. And that what they encounter in the family, and let us say even going back to this issue of faith, because unfortunately also many parents end up using religion itself to justify and validate their mistreatment of their children, or of them demanding that their children become fully obedient, so to speak. And it's clearly, that's part of our tradition, to be good and dutiful to our parents. But what is not acceptable is for us to invalidate their emotions and their core needs. But it's one thing to approach our children in a healthy fashion and educate them about their religion. It's quite another to manipulate our religion and teachings and end up hurting our children. Bottom line is that it's really, this work involves a lot of education, and also providing that message to people that we work with, that they really do matter, that they're loved, that there are people around them who are looking out for them, and that their needs are quite valid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also important to remember that sometimes parents really do love their children and may not know the best way to get their children to be the good human beings that they want them to be. And so the methodology may be lacking, and doesn't really resonate with people, doesn't necessarily make people feel loved and appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily that in all these cases we're talking about abuse. So there are cases, like, I just want to talk a little bit about the continuum of relationships so that we're all clear what we're talking about. That, relationships can range from very healthy to unhealthy to abusive. Like, we can have that whole spectrum. And so in the abusive relationships, that's really going to be a separate topic, not what we're talking about today. The relationships we'll be talking about today are on the spectrum between, healthy, where people are getting their needs met and mutually, respectful. And then, on moving down the spectrum to unhealthy, where these core needs are not being met. And so maybe you could take a couple of minutes and talk about, what are these core needs? What is it that every person is kind of wired to need? And how do we even know that?
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. It's interesting. I'm going to also share with everyone here that I'm also like a student of all of this. And honestly, most of what I share, if not all, are things that are actually grown to experience myself, and also from the successes and the failures. Meaning that unless we taste something and we see that its impact, we're not going to be convinced. So I can say here, first, before even delving into this, that there has to be this recognition that we're all human beings. I mean, we're flawed. Allah made us finite, so that we can actually turn to Him humbly to ask for help. And even beautifully speaking here, subhanAllah, and insightfully, we see within the stories of the prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal, family struggle. So, we need to also have this hope in Allah Azza wa Jal and understand that part of the human journey is to encounter issues, and it's not about eliminating conflict in our lives. It's about having a mature way of approaching them and understanding our core needs, as you've alluded to. So just a reminder to everybody about the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and his brothers literally wanting to murder the guy, end up, because of their rancor and hate and cruelty, separating him from his parents and family for some 4 decades. I mean, talk about trauma. We see Lut struggle with his wife. We see Nuh struggle with his wife. We see Asya, the wife of Pharaoh, struggling with her husband, who was the ultimate kafir on earth. We see Nuh with his child. So we've seen all the variations of struggle within families, honestly giving us hope that, inshallah, we're walking in the same footsteps, but it's a matter of, inshallah, being responsible and carrying that divine duty. From there, I would say, in terms of the core needs, subhanAllah, let me just illustrate it with an analogy here. And this has really, honestly, enlightened my understanding of things. There are 2 analogies that struck me to the core. First, the seed in a soil. We're very accustomed to planting a seed in a soil, and we let the rest take care of itself. We rarely reflect. Allah invites us in the Quran to reflect deeply so that we can derive these understandings about ourselves as human beings and understand our potential and what these needs are. We place that seed, and the seed holds that incredible potential to become a tree of shading beauty, of fruits. But that little seed, nobody, if you were to see it, measure it, it's meaningless. It has no value almost, but yet it carries that potential. But the question is, when does it actually open and become that beautiful tree that shades and gives fruits to creation? When it's planted in the correct soil, and that soil provides the care, so to speak, the nourishment, and when it's watered, and amazing things happen. In the presence of that, what I would call a hug, caring hug of the soil, this soil, the seed starts to open up, and we're mesmerized by the fulfilled potential and the promise of the seed. Same exact thing happens in the womb of a mother, and may Allah bless all of our mothers, and honestly, all the pain and labor you go through. SubhanAllah, the same phenomenon occur, a seed, where it comes from that sperm and an egg that we're united in this beautiful union, talk about intimacy. We get planted in this caring wall, a womb of a mother that gives so much, day and night. And when that security happens and that affection and nourishment happens, the seed similarly starts to open up and it becomes the fulfilled potential. Me and you and every human being. Allah is inviting us to look deeply. You provide that core need, or for that, core need, and fulfill those core needs of that specimen. Incredible things will happen. And for me, this points out or identifies or highlights this core need to be appreciated, seen, recognized, being made to feel safe, and also ultimately loved. Those needs, unfortunately, have become so neglected in our day-to-day interactions with our family members. And maybe we're good at even giving those things to others around us. We know how to say the thank yous and the love yous to others around us, but perhaps within our family, environments, we're withholding these essential things that provide that soil, the climate for individuals within our families to literally grow and thrive and flourish, to become trees. So there's a lot, again, on the subject of love and how to actually make people around us feel loved. But if, of all things that I would say, I cannot think of one singular core emotional need that is at the heart of our existence as human beings, that Allah literally wired us to crave, to need to experience day in and day out, and not once in a while. So, again, love to hear your perspectives on that. Sister Selma, from your also counsel to people, and how much you've seen also them perhaps lacking, those experiences in their lives, that they end up feeling perhaps broken or feeling that void in their lives.
Yeah, I just really appreciated your metaphor of the seed. It's something that I, when I'm working with couples, I often talk about the relationship like a garden. In the same way, that if we kind of take it for granted that these relationships will just be fine, we don't have to do anything, but actually it's a lot of, active and intentional work that we have to, find ways to water that relationship. What's the sunshine for that relationship? What's going to nurture and nourish it so that people can grow and flourish? And I think that, partly many of us just didn't know that these relationships take work. And we just sort of assume, like you said, you put the seed and it's just going to grow, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the rain and he puts the sunshine, right? But in our relationships, that nurturing does come from positive expressions of affection, letting people know we value them and what their contributions are in our daily life, and just, affirming the positive qualities in them. And I think, what I've worked mostly in the Muslim community, and so a lot of, particularly in the immigrant Muslim community, some of our cultures really discourage speaking positively. There's a fear that this is going to lead to arrogance, and there's a fear that we won't actually improve if we just, if we amplify the positive. And I like to remind people that one of our qualities as believers is that we have to be grateful, we have to show gratitude. And if we don't actually take a moment to notice what's going right in the relationship or what's going right with people, we actually can't be grateful. And, it is incumbent on us to express shukr, to be grateful and show gratitude. And if we don't show gratitude to each other, then we're not being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it really is all connected, this, our faith and how we treat people and how we cultivate these environments that make people thrive. And so as you were alluding, there is a real negative impact when people aren't getting the nurturing, when they're not getting that sunshine and water and nourishing soil. That's actually probably the bulk of my business is working with people who are suffering in one way or another, because of either a gap or something that was missing in the relationships, or real mental health issues as well. I'm a mental health professional, but oftentimes it's relational. It is these relational pieces that got missed along the way. And I'd love to hear more, kind of your experience of, not just the negative impact, but also what difference can it make if we make a switch and we're active and intentional about providing those positive ingredients.
SubhanAllah, this is, it's an amazing thing that it's at the heart of our faith, and faith ultimately is from Allah Azza wa Jal, who created and wired us to be the creatures that we are with these incredible needs. Like, oftentimes we paid attention to the physical and we stay at the surface, like, oh, we understand how to give our spouses and our children food and drink and shelter, but then to tune into these deeper emotional needs that Allah has put. People didn't just fictitiously kind of pretend, hey, listen, I have these things that I need. Allah wired us to be the living creatures that we are, who have these incredible core needs. What's amazing is how Allah interconnected, as you've mentioned, Sister Salma, everything together. We're blessed actually to be living in the time we are. Everything happens clearly for a reason. There are many challenges that we encounter. The world is pressing harder and harder on our children and our families, which is also another significant thing we need to pay attention to. That if we're not providing for their core emotional needs, spiritual needs within the home, how are they going to be able to survive the onslaught of cultural attacks, of atheism even? One of the areas that I work on is atheism. There's significant growth in atheism amongst our children. Latest reported statistics are actually quite frightening, including a rise of detachment from faith up to 24-25% amongst the Muslim community. Many people kind of pretend that it's not there. It is there. I see it daily among young people. So Allah has connected really everything together. And the amazing thing about these times that we're living in is that there's been a lot of kind of research studies that have taken place that have delved deep into studying the impacts of, having secure attachments with our children, with our spouses. And that means, having those strong emotional bonds where the care receiver is feeling secure, feeling trusted, feeling seen, feeling that they can depend on the caregiver. And, when that bond is there and they feel cared for and loved, extraordinary things happen to them, to their well-being mentally, emotionally, cognitively, and socially. It literally impacts who we are right now, how we feel, how we handle life and stress, and even who we become. That's actually a very promising thing, but it's also a scary thing. That literally what I give my child and my spouse right now, in terms of love and care, recognition, appreciation, and making them feel safe, literally determines the quality of their lives and whether they are able to flourish and grow. So among the things that they've finding more and more in science is that our brain development is even driven forward through our experiences, especially at home. Literally every single interaction and connection we have in our lives forges the neural connections in our heads over time and allows us to even develop complex neural functioning in our brains. They found that, amongst other things, that, for example, the prefrontal cortex, or what Allah calls a nasiya in the Quran. And it's interesting, Allah, again, no accidents in the Quran. Allah is intentional, and He's the source behind everything we experience within us and outside of us. Prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of our executive functioning, responsible for many critical functions inside of us, including higher level thinking, morality, intuition, even emotional regulation, empathy, insight. It's all right here in the forelock, in this prefrontal cortex. They found that actually the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, is strengthened in children who have secure attachments with their parents and they feel safe, secure, and loved. Bottom line is that we do better as human beings. We grow, we become a better functioning specimen when we're loved and cared for, exactly like that seed in the soil. There are other things as well that have been found to be quite extraordinary in terms of the impact. And it also points out how Allah wired us to be creatures that literally operate on this continual fuel of love, care, and affection. And by the way, just a point here is that affection is not just loving someone. It's about making them feel loved. Because parents, who doesn't love their children? You know, we all love our children. We all want our children to be those righteous children that make dua for us, right? But it's a matter of making them feel loved, making the spouses feel loved. Now, couple of things that I'd like to point out here that really blew my mind away. And I said, subhanAllah, after just kind of learning about them. There's an interesting nerve, cranial nerve, that connects the brain from the brainstem side to the heart, one of the cranial nerves. And this cranial nerve, it plays a major role, as we're told in physiology, in regulating the heart rate, synchronizing the heart, and also keeping the GI tract working in order. It allows for sensory information to be communicated from internal organs back to the brain. They literally call it the nerve of emotion. It's this vagus nerve. And as they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Here we would say that what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas. Because the amazing thing that has been observed in science is that when people experience love and affection in their lives, that those experiences have a lasting impact on strengthening the vagus nerve. That's extraordinary. Literally, this is the nerve that makes us feel safe, that makes us feel connected, that regulates our heart and ability even to deal with stress. It literally reduces our essentially stress hormones when we're feeling stressed out. So when it's healthy, we become more functional human beings that are able to deal with the rigors and the challenges of life. Amazingly, Allah wired us to need love to strengthen that nerve. So can you imagine in those moments when I'm hugging my child, when I'm recognizing them, when I'm smiling in their faces, I'm literally feeding and strengthening their vagus nerve in that moment. Who could, think that way? That's incredible information that we're learning from our faith, and now we're merging it with contemporary research that allows us to, enlighten us to this awareness of the need to be present and to feed our children and family members with all the love that they need in their lives. Another thing that I wanted to point out that also blew my mind away about our physiology and how it's interconnected with our emotional well-being is this neurochemical. Because it turns out that, providing love and care also alters our neurochemical functioning in our bodies. So it literally resculpts the brain, alters our neurochemical behavior in the body, and it sets off a chain reaction of processes, literally in those moments when you're experiencing love. So for example, this neurochemical that I'm sure some people have heard of on this call called oxytocin. Now, I was blown away when I learned about oxytocin. I'm like, I need oxytocin every single moment. So what's up with this oxytocin? This is a neurochemical, a hormone that gets released as part of the design of Allah Azza wa Jal during breastfeeding. Imagine that moment when the mother is feeding her child. Literally, there's an extra secretion of oxytocin in her. When people snuggle, when people hug each other, when they hold hands, when they massage, even when they do salah. I mean, this is incredible. So in those experiences, Allah allows for this hormone to be secreted in the brain. And in turn, what it does is that it makes us feel connected, bonded with those care providers, and it makes us feel good in that moment. Literally, it elevates the feelings of joy. More interestingly, they found that oxytocin promotes other positive emotions in the human being, including joy, hope, trust, forgiveness, generosity. All of that is happening in that one brief moment when oxytocin is being secreted in our systems. And when does that happen? Literally, as an example, when we receive a hug, when someone is recognizing us or thanking us or making us feel unique and appreciated. Within those moments, all these processes, this incredible chain reaction is taking place in the body to elevate it and make it flourish. I say subhanallah when I come across these things. And as a human being, as a father, as a husband, I'm actually, I try to just be conscious about these things because I know I'm forgetful. But imagine the ability to bring that level of consciousness with every single interaction we have with our children and family members, that I'm literally now impacting your brain development, your ability to feel joy connected to me. There's this interconnection between all of us. We're connected. These neurochemicals and the wiring of our nerves, if anything, it indicates how interconnected we are and how there's this ripple effect that goes back and forth with every word and every ounce of energy and every interaction we have with human beings around us. So really extraordinary sons of Allah all around us that beckon us to literally pause and reflect and say, listen, I need it right now. I need to give my family member what they deserve, as Allah Azza wa Jal has asked me to. So I'm going to again stop here and turn it back to you, Sister Selma, for your also like insights on all of this and what you find perhaps to be really critical things that beg us to actually pay attention to the subject of providing that necessary care and love for our family members.
I was just really enjoying listening to you and, being reminded of how many opportunities we have in every day and every interaction to make a positive difference. And, as you were saying, like, just imagine, like, you're actually changing somebody's brain in a positive way. And, the message of hope is that, sometimes people are like, well, I didn't know this when my kids were little, so it's too late. And what we know is that, with neuroplasticity, our brain continues to be able to change. And so that's actually how therapy works, that we, in that space, we're able to create change, structural changes in the brain, in that relationship, in that safe space, in the therapy room. And we can do this in our relationships as well. So it's never too late. If you didn't get it right early in the relationship, you can always try to get it right now. And every time you offer the hug or the affirmation or, the appreciation, it does help to heal and repair as well. And, I wanted to go back a little bit. You talked about safety and how important safety is. And I think that sometimes people don't really understand why a relationship might feel unsafe. Because if I love you and I'm just trying to help you be a better person, and my way of helping you to be a better person is to point out all your flaws so you can get better, right? That doesn't feel safe. So you said something really critical, that it's the person on the receiving end should feel loved, should feel safe. I don't get to evaluate whether I'm making you feel safe. You evaluate if you're feeling safe, right? And so if you're giving me feedback that you don't feel safe, then I need to understand what is it that's making you feel unsafe. And generally it's, very, very commonly, it's criticism, it's focusing on what people are not doing right, it's, telling people what's wrong with them. And we sometimes do that with the intention of helping, but it generally isn't helpful. It generally makes people feel bad on the inside. They may change their behavior on the outside, in line with what you're asking them to do, but on the inside, it has the effect of making people shrink and shrivel and withdraw. And sometimes it has the effect of making people get angry and hurt and resentful. So, if you think about, if you ask yourself, something that I could do to make a particular relationship safe, you might start by asking the other person, what's their evaluation? Do they feel safe and do they feel loved? Because you may really believe that you're expressing that love. But in most of the, cases where I'm doing family work or couples work, people are saying, I don't feel loved. I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel valued. I don't feel understood. And, the other person be like, but why? I'm giving you this and I'm paying the bills and I'm, and I cook your food and, so it's the pieces that are missing are these, the things that make a person feel loved. And people are different. For some people, they need those words of affirmation. Other people, they need that touch, the hug, the holding hands. Other people, it's gifts, quality time, acts of service. And subhanAllah, these are all things that the Prophet ﷺ, encouraged us to do. In the hadith, we have, encouragement to give gifts, encouragement to express our love, and he modeled that for us as well. And so I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about that too, the model of the Prophet, peace be on him, in his different relationships, how he showed us all of these things before the research was out, right? So before we knew the concrete impact on the brain, we have these teachings, right? So it's our faith teaching, and it's also neurologically sound behavior as well. Yeah.
Now, may Allah bless you, Sister Salma. Inshallah, hit on some incredible key insights about the need to, if I were to summarize it, it's like listening, right? What a desperately needed habit in our lives. One of the challenges that I've seen also myself struggle with is inability to see the needs of those around me, but being so focused solely on my needs. That's a tall order for us to transport ourselves from our centers to the centers around us. That we're part of this incredible existence where we impact and we're being impacted, but that the needs of others are valid. And one of the mature signs of maturity, even spiritually, is to literally be able to empathize. Empathize means putting myself in somebody else's shoes. Now, I'll be honest with you, as also an imam, we're so good on standing at the pulpit and preaching mercy and having to do mercy. We need to be merciful. We need to be merciful. We need to be empathetic. But walking the walk is a different story. Walking the walk means I have to literally force myself to be silent at times and just ask curious questions of the person in front of me. There's a beautiful concept or rule that I've learned from psychology that says, name it to tame it. I'm like, what? What does that mean? They say actually one of the best ways to calm human beings, children, spouses, anybody in our lives, when they're not doing well emotionally, is to literally help them name that emotion. Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? And for them to articulate that emotion, oh my goodness, I've tried it with my children after I've learned it too late, by the way. SubhanAllah, you can see extraordinary miracles happening in front of you where they start to gain that brief serenity and calmness when they feel seen and we're able again to articulate those emotions. But that's not an easy thing. It demands again an effort, a commitment to listen empathetically, to ask people around us about what they need and how they're feeling. But the results are extraordinary. Now, taking it back to our faith, it really is part of our faith. It's just unfortunately been glossed over. Even before even talking about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we see in the Quran, for example, in marriage, Allah decided and decreed, as the creator of the heavens and the earth, that indeed, for example, the purpose of a marriage, family also, is serenity. And then he tells us how to gain that serenity. And he says, mawaddata wa rahmah. Very simple. Like, I've placed amongst you as spouses, as family members, two ingredients that literally emanate from Allah himself. They're part of his essence, rahmah, which includes also understanding the needs of others, empathizing with them, and then alleviating the pain and the suffering that they have physically and verbally and emotionally. That's rahmah. But also he says mawadda. Mawadda literally in Arabic means expressing your love for another and making them feel love through words and actions. So Allah put it in the heart of the Quran that we can never feel serene and grow without mawadda and rahmah. Again, highlighting that we all need this. Allah Azza wa Jal calls himself as one of his attributes, al-wadud. Now again, how desperate we are and in need we are of understanding and connecting with the name of Allah, al-wadud. So he says, it is my nature, it is my essence to make everything in creation feel loved through gifts, through my bounties, verbally and physically. That's an extraordinary thing to understand about the nature of Allah. And the scholars even say, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, right? Model and emulate, they actually say, the beauty of Allah himself, the nature of Allah himself. And there are aspects of Allah's nature that we are, that we can emulate because we ultimately, came from Allah Azza wa Jal. So Allah demands of us to literally emulate this incredible, beautiful quality of wood, the ability to demonstrate and express that love to creation around us. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the master at this, and he literally walked the walk, not just talked the talk from the pulpit. So we see Prophet Muhammad ﷺ going literally out of his way to make every single human being and every single creature around him feel love. We see him, for example, with his wife Fatima, and this is an amazing thing. We find him having a special nickname for her, Al-Humayra. So he would often call her not just by her name, but also by her nickname. Why? Because she loved that nickname, Al-Humayra, the rosy-cheeked one. We see the Prophet ﷺ eating from the same bowl of soup that, in this case, Aisha, I referred to his daughter, and I'm going to get to his daughter shortly. Here's Aisha drinking from the bowl of soup and taking a sip from it. And the Prophet ﷺ would look literally as they're eating together on a table or on the floor, would grab that bowl, turn it around literally to the spot where she put her lips and start drinking from that spot. Imagine the message that he's the center in that moment, that you're so dear to me, that you're so important to me, and here's my gesture of love to you. Can you imagine how lifted her soul would be in that moment? It was the habit of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to even also put his knee on the ground to allow his wife Aisha to climb onto a camel by placing her foot on his thigh. That's the Prophet ﷺ. He used to, as we know from the traditions, race with her, joke with her, praise her eyes. She would also praise him in return. So they're really investing in each other. It was the habit of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ towards children, for example, with Fatima, that whenever she stepped into a room where he was, and it didn't matter who was there. And again, compare that to our behavior as parents. When we send our children, push them away, say, hey, Abe, there are adults in the room, get away from here. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as soon as Fatima would come in, he would call her, she would come towards him, he would kiss her, greet her, kiss her on her forehead, and then get up and put her in his seat. Can you imagine how she feels in that moment? How he feels, and what message everyone around him gets, that indeed she matters, she's important. It didn't matter what I was doing in that moment. She needed to be seen and acknowledged and loved in that moment. And I would imagine also Fatima, she wouldn't have done this, stepped into the room without feeling safe with Prophet Muhammad, without knowing that he's gonna hug me, kiss me in front of everybody because I'm a human being that matters to him. It was the habit of Prophet Muhammad, and this taught me a lot. We would think that this intimacy of Prophet Muhammad was with only human beings, but it was also with, inanimate objects and other living creatures. We heard of this beautiful story where the Prophet it was his, Prophet Muhammad in his masjid used to give the sermons by a tree. And by the way, those who go to Al-Rawda will see a pillar called al-mukhallaqa. You see on top of it a word says mukhallaqa. That marks a tree that was by the mihrab of the Prophet ﷺ where he used to give his sermons. And he used to put his arm around this tree or stand by it when he gave his khutbahs. When they built his pulpit, the Prophet ﷺ moved from the mihrab and started giving the sermons on the pulpit. The Sahaba swear, the companions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ swear, they say when he did that, we swear by Allah that we heard a moaning from the tree, a cry coming out of this tree. Now imagine now how, as a khatib, I would react. I would shut somebody up and say, hey, listen, I'm talking here. The Prophet ﷺ, they reported, the Sahaba stepped down from the pulpit, went straight to the tree in front of all these people and put his arm around the tree. They say that when he did, and they witnessed this, they say, we swear by Allah that the cry of that tree subsided. Then he turned to the tree and he said, what if I were to tell you that you will be with me in Jannah? Or as the Prophet told that tree. They say, when he said that, we swear by Allah that the crying of the tree stopped completely. I was like just blown away. This is our beloved Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was keen on actually hugging, touching, talk about oxytocin, right? The oxytocin of the tree was keen to him, and this tree mattered to him as a human being. The cat mattered to him, the dog mattered to him, the tree, and he spoke to them to give them attention and acknowledgement and even care, and the tree responded. One final example that is beautiful, talk about how to raise children and how to nurture the relationships with other spouses. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu with Mu'adh ibn Jabal, one day the Prophet sallallahu was praying with him, and after the salah, he was keen on teaching all the people around him. But that, how did he teach them? He gave them an initial dose of love before teaching them the lessons. When they were done with the salah, he turned towards Mu'adh and locked eyes with him, and then he grabbed his hand first. So he started with the physical. He started with his hand. He held it tightly while looking at him. After delivering that beautiful touch that made Mu'adh love physically, he said to him, O Mu'adh, Wallahi, and he was swearing, Wallahi ya Mu'adh, Wallahi ya Mu'adh, inni la uhibbuk. Wallahi Mu'adh, I love you, I love you, I love you. So this is amazing. I mean, first he started with a physical touch, then proceeded with a verbal expression to make Mu'adh feel loved. Can you imagine the feeling of Mu'adh in that moment? That he was so seen and appreciated and loved verbally and physically even by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Afterward, he went and advised Mu'adh saying, O Mu'adh, after each salah, I want you to say, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Say, O Mu'adh, after each salah, O Allah, assist me to mention you, to worship you well, and to thank you. When did that happen? After making him feel loved. That's extraordinary. Talk about sunnah of love to learn from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The examples are numerous, and we really need to connect with that beautiful tradition of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that allowed him to be really the walking mercy in creation, and to have this impact ripple out to lift up everybody, including the tree and the stone. So again, I'll stop here and turn it back to you, Sister Salma, for also
such
thoughts and insights.
Beautiful stories and reminders. I just want to let people who are participating here, let you know that if you wanted to send in questions, you can type them in the chat box. And as questions come in, we'll shift to those questions for the remainder of our time. You can just type them in, and hopefully I will be able to read them and address them. But you know, as I was listening to these stories, which I've heard so many times, but every time I hear them, I find them so moving. That the Prophet ﷺ, he not only modeled these very concrete ways of how we can express affection, he also modeled this humility. You know, he had such a humble nature. He was the Prophet ﷺ. He was the head of state. He was the head of a family. He was, you know, the head of everything. He was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet he made sure to make everyone around him feel good. You know, there's the stories that you gave, and there are other stories where, you know, he proclaimed his love publicly. You know, that I don't remember the name of the Sahabi who was asking him,
Amr ibn al-As.
Who is your favorite? You know, and he was hoping that it would be himself, you know. But the Prophet ﷺ was not shy to talk about his love in public, and ultimately it was his wife, you know, who was his favorite. And the fact that in that culture and society, that's not what people did. People did not publicly express affection. You know, there was the Bedouin man who said he has 10 sons and he never kissed any of them, and he was kind of proud about that, right? And the Prophet ﷺ reminded him that this affection is a reflection of the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in our hearts. And so he was actively engaged in trying to change a culture and a society. And I think that for us, you know, when we're wanting to make changes in our family, if the family culture has not been one where people express affection or appreciations, or even, you know, even say I love you. In many families, people don't even say I love you. And so if you're wanting to make that change, it might feel like, well, how can I do that? We just don't say these things in our family. You know, so many times when I do marital workshops, couples workshops, and the first thing that I teach people is appreciation. Just, you know, it's an exercise. You sit down and just say one thing that you appreciate about your spouse. And in every workshop, there will be a couple that's been married for 30, 40 years, and they'll say, well, I never appreciated. I never said appreciation about anything. And then they're willing to practice it, and the transformation that happens in that moment, you know, for both people. Because when you give an appreciation, your heart softens. And when you receive an appreciation, your heart softens. And so if you're wanting to make these changes, just remember that, the Prophet ﷺ, he was changing a whole culture. This was not the existing culture. It wasn't normal at that time. And so if it doesn't feel normal in your family, you can still start, trying to make those changes. And remember that, you would be following the model of the Prophet ﷺ by creating that change. And it can be difficult if that's not the norm. It can be difficult. And, I do suggest sometimes that families start like a game. After dinner, everybody has to go around the table and say something positive. And the parents have to start as the model. And that you can tell your kids, we're going to try something new. We haven't done it before. If you're changing, if it's a big culture change in the family. And then to kind of debrief afterwards, what was that like? And people will generally say it's weird, but it felt good. It's uncomfortable, but, it feels good. And then, I really just wanted to add to what you said about the way the Prophet ﷺ gave, he gave advice to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, right? It wasn't even a criticism, but even just telling him something good he could do, which we now practice, so many years later. You made a point of listing kind of how he created a connection before he told him what to do. And I mean, certainly have been guilty of this myself many times as a parent. We just start by saying what, why haven't you done this? And why haven't you done that? And we skip the connection. We skip making the person feel good. We skip creating that safe bond. And when we have that safe bond, one, even the way we deliver the advice is going to be different, softer, right? Because we have that connection. We've built the connection and we're both feeling it, right? That those, neurochemicals are flowing in both directions. And so it's what we say will come out in such a different way, and how it will be received. You can give a person nasiha, which many Muslims feel like that's my one and only job is to give nasiha. I better fix you, brother. But if we see this model, that nasiha comes in a context, and it takes time to build that relationship and that feeling of safety. And then the other person will love to hear what we have to say, if we've taken the time to let them know. I mean, you said that he told Mu'adh ibn Jabal 3 times, I love you. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. I love you, and so I'm going to tell you how to get better. No, like he really made him feel it. So, I just think that story in and of itself tells us so much. That, I think, even though, again, I've heard it before, but I just want to reflect more on it, because there's so much packed into it.
So true. So true. And I want to say, Barakallah fiki, it's what a joy to engage with you in conversations on these things that we all need. We all need reminding as well. And it's part of our human journey. And it's honestly what concerns me the most is to see young people and spouses struggle unnecessarily. There's a lot of you spoke of this continuum, and many issues definitely demand intervention, and it's not acceptable to accept victimhood. But I'm talking about the day-to-day common experiences. When these kids and spouses are broken and they're starving for a fulfillment of these essential needs, they're going to have to find an outlet for that. So we as parents carry a divine duty. It's not a joke. When we're not able to fulfill, with humility also and courage, step out of our comfort zone and say, I am sorry, I've done this to you. I appreciate you. I love you. And to push ourselves, nothing is easy. No muscle grows without effort and striving and mujahada. We know this. It's not meant to be easy. And that's why we're rewarded abundantly for these efforts. If we're not going to do this, if our children, they might be silent in front of us. We have no idea what struggles they're facing outside. And that's why their faith can get compromised. It can end up with the wrong people. And I could tell you numerous stories about tragedies that have happened because of just the lack of attention, time, and love that our children need to be given. But, again, when these things are withheld, there's a void that they're going to need to fill somewhere. And imagine, again, the consequences they're quite severe. And I urge really parents that despite where we are in life, first have hope in Allah Azza wa Jal. And that it's really also part of the prophetic tradition is to also acknowledge guilt. And just, it's okay to say, I'm sorry. It's actually a sign of courage, if anything. Adam said it. Allah taught him to say, I'm sorry. And hey, listen, we didn't eat from the tree, right? No matter what we do, it's, you know what? We didn't eat from the tree that Allah said, don't eat from the tree. But he taught him, say, listen, I've wronged myself. And his growth occurred after apologizing. Yunus alayhi salam, his ability to heal and be restored occurred after acknowledging guilt. That's a divine lesson for all of us that, listen, say I'm sorry. Allah will help you in healing. And it doesn't matter, the rest is on Allah Azza wa Jal, but we got to take that step of acknowledging that there's an issue, that we have a lot to learn, and going out of our way to, and apologizing to those people who might have hurt and really looking deep within. But from there, Allah is present. And I actually want to say something very essential. Allah states in the Quran that we need to turn to Him and depend on Him in this effort, because we cannot make it on our own. Allah controls the hearts of our spouses, our children, our parents. How about invoking Allah Azza wa Jal and asking for help with all of this? And that's why He put this beautiful dua in Surah Al-Furqan as actually a sign of the faithful. Imagine a sign of the faithful is to turn to Allah and make dua, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. All of us are struggling, in our families in some ways, right? The dua says that Allah teaches us is, oh Allah, oh our Lord, grant us from our spouses and our children, قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ, joy, serenity, essential for our hearts and eyes, coolness for our eyes. This dua is powerful. For me, it's literally an acknowledgement that it's Allah who ultimately changes hearts and souls, but that we have to make the effort. But we cannot forget about Allah in this whole picture, and to just continue to have hope no matter where we are in life. Plant the seeds, Allah takes care of the rest. But we cannot keep looking at others around us and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to love you until you love me. I'm not going to say I'm sorry until you apologize. I'm not going to say thank you until you become grateful. That is the attitude that will breed nothing but deeper and deeper broken relationships and problems in our lives. And ultimately, we have to answer to Allah Azza wa Jal.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, Chaplain Tarif. I mean, this has been such a beautiful conversation, and I think, for many people, just a very helpful reminder of what we can do and what we should be doing. And for some people, this may be new, and I think that wherever we are and we're in our journey, there's always something that we can do, to make ourselves one notch better, to take our relationships one notch higher. And so wherever you are, I'm talking to all of you who are listening, wherever you are in your relationships, take one thing from this, from the lessons we've learned today. Just take one thing and see if you can make one small change in your relationship, and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees every effort that you make. And that, if you have made a lot of mistakes, I like to remind myself and people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reminder that we should not despair of His mercy. No matter what we have done, لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله, do not despair of Allah's mercy. So He is so kind and forgiving and, merciful to us. And so we get as many chances as we need. We just keep trying. So I'm noticing that there aren't questions. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. I really appreciate all of those who participated today. I do for sure appreciate Sumaya, who's making sure we don't have technological nightmares here, which are always my worst nightmare. And I'm very grateful to Chaplain Tarif for taking the time out and for reaching out to Peaceful Families Project so that we can work together. And inshallah, we want as many people as possible to benefit from your work and from our work. So please also share, participants, please share with others. We'll have the recording up. If you're receiving our newsletter, you'll see it on our website. So Jazakumullah khair to all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all in your relationships and give us all success, inshallah. Okay. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.